Fahrenheit 451, starting from the middle of nowhere, I guess. Well, not the middle of nowhere, you know what I mean. He looked down the boulevard. It was clear now. A car full of children, all ages, God knew, from 12 to 16, out whistling, yelling, hurrahing, had seen a man, a very extraordinary sight. A man strolling, a rarity, and simply said, "Let's get him," not knowing he was the fugitive Mr. Montag. Simply a number of children out for a long night of roaring 500 or 600 miles in a few moonlit hours. Their faces icy with wind, and coming home or not coming at dawn, alive or not alive, that made the adventure. They would have killed me, thought Montag, swaying, the air still torn and stirring about him in dust, touching his bruised cheek. For no reason at all in the world they would have killed me. He walked toward the far curb, telling each foot to go and keep going. Somehow he had picked up the spilled books. He didn't remember bending or touching them. He kept moving them from hand to hand, as if they were a poker hand he could not figure. I wonder if they were the ones who killed Clarice. He stopped, and his mind said it again, very loud. I wonder if they were the ones who killed Clarice. He wanted to run after them, yelling. His eyes watered. The thing that had saved him was falling flat. The driver of that car, seeing Montag down, instinctively considered the probability that running over a body at that speed might turn the car upside down and spill them out. If Montag had remained an upright target? Montag gasped. Far down the boulevard, 4 blocks away, the beetle had slowed, spun about on 2 wheels, and was now racing back, slanting over on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the street, picking up speed. But Montag was gone, hidden in the safety of the dark alley, for which he had set out on a long journey, an hour, or was it a minute, ago. He stood shivering in the night, looking back out as the beetle ran by and skidded back to the center of the avenue, whirling laughter in the air, all about it, gone. Further on, as Montag moved in darkness, he could see the helicopters falling, like the first flakes of snow, in the long winter to come. The house was silent. Montag approached from the rear, creeping through a thick night-moistened scent of daffodils and roses and wet grass. He touched the screen door in back, found it open, slipped in, moved across the porch, listening. "Mrs. Black, are you asleep in there?" he thought. "This isn't good, but your husband did it to others, and never asked, and never wondered, and never worried. And now, since you're a fireman's wife, it's your house, and your turn. For all the houses your husband burned, and all the people he hurt without thinking." The house did not reply. He hid the books in the kitchen, and moved from the house again to the alley, and looked back, and the house was still dark and quiet, sleeping. On his way across town, with the helicopters fluttering like torn bits of paper in the sky, he phoned the alarm at a lonely phone booth outside a store that was closed for the night. Then he stood in the cold night air, waiting, and at a distance he heard the fire sirens start up and run, and the salamanders coming to burn Mr. Black's house, while he was away at work, to make his wife stand shivering in the morning air, while the roof let go and dropped in upon the fire. But now she was asleep. "Good night, Mrs. Black," he thought. Faber! Another rap, a whisper, and a long waiting. Then, after a minute, a small light flickered inside Faber's small house. After another pause, the back door opened. They stood looking at each other in the half-light, Faber and Montag, as if each did not believe in the other's existence. Then Faber moved and put out his hand and grabbed Montag and moved him in. and sat him down and went back and stood in the door, listening. The sirens were wailing off in the morning distance. He came in and shut the door. Montag said, "I've been a fool all down the line. I can't stay long. I'm on my way God knows where." "At least you were a fool about the right things," said Faber. "I thought you were dead. The audio capsule I gave you, burnt. I heard the captain talking to you, and suddenly there was nothing. I almost came out looking for you. The captain's dead. He found the audio capsule. He heard your voice. He was going to trace it. I killed him with the flamethrower." Faber sat down and did not speak for a time. "My God, how did this happen?" said Montag. "It was only the other night everything was fine, and next thing I know I'm drowning. How many times can a man go down and still be alive? I can't breathe. There's Beatty, dead, and he was my friend once. And there's Millie, gone. I thought she was my wife, but now I don't know. And the house all burnt. And my job gone, and myself on the run, and I planted a book in a fireman's house on the way. Good Christ, the things I've done in a single week." "You did what you had to do. It was coming on for a long time." "Yes, I believe that. If there's nothing else, I believe. It saved itself up to happen. I could feel it for a long time. I was saving something up. I went around doing one thing and feeling another. God, it was all there. It's a wonder it didn't show on me like fat. And now here I am messing up your life. They might follow me here." "I feel alive for the first time in years," said Faber. "I feel I'm doing what I should have done a lifetime ago. For a little while I'm not afraid. Maybe it's because I'm doing the right thing at last. Maybe it's because I've done a rash thing and don't want to look the coward to you. I suppose I'll have to do even more violent things, exposing myself so I won't fall down on the job and turn scared again. What are your plans?" "To keep running." "You know the war's on. I heard." "God, isn't it funny?" said the old man. "It seems so remote because we have our own troubles." "I haven't had time to think." Montag drew out $100. "I want this to stay with you. Use it any way that'll help when I'm gone. But I might be dead by noon. Use this." Faber nodded. "You'd better head for the river if you can. Follow along it, and if you can hit the old railroad lines going out into the country, follow them. Even though practically everything's airborne these days, and most of the tracks are abandoned, the rails are still there, rusting. I've heard there are still hobo camps all across the country, here and there. Walking camps, they call them. And if you keep walking far enough and keep an eye peeled, they say there's lots of old Harvard degrees on the tracks between here and Los Angeles. Most of them are wanted and hunted in the cities. They survive, I guess. There aren't many of them, and I guess the government's never considered them a great enough danger to go in and track them down. You might hole up with them for a time and get in touch with me in St. Louis. I'm leaving on the 5 a.m. bus this morning to see a retired printer there. I'm getting out into the open myself at last. The money will be put to good use. Thanks, and God bless you. Do you want to sleep a few minutes? I'd better run. Let's check." He took Montag quickly into the bedroom and lifted a picture frame aside, revealing a television screen the size of a postal card. "I always wanted something very small, something I could talk to, something I could blot out with the palm of my hand if necessary, nothing that could shut me down, nothing monstrously big. So, you see." He snapped it on. "Montag," the TV set said, and lit up. Montag. The name was spelled out by the voice. Guy Montag. Still running. Police helicopters are up. A new mechanical hound has been brought from another district. Montag and Faber looked at each other. Mechanical hound never fails. Never since its first use in tracking quarry has this incredible invention made a mistake. Tonight, this network is proud to have the opportunity to follow the Hound by camera helicopter as it starts on its way to the target. Faber poured 2 glasses of whiskey. We'll need these. They drank. Nose so sensitive the mechanical hound can remember and identify 10,000 odor indexes on 10,000 men without resetting. Faber trembled the least bit and looked about at his house, at the walls, the door, the doorknob, and the chair where Montag now sat. Montag saw the look. They both looked quickly about the house, and Montag felt his nostrils dilate, and he knew that he was trying to track himself, and his nose was suddenly good enough to sense the path he had made in the air of the room, and the sweat of his hand hung from the doorknob, invisible, but as numerous as the jewels of a small chandelier. He was everywhere, in and on and about everything. He was a luminous cloud, a ghost that made breathing once more impossible. He saw Faber stop up his own breath for fear of drawing that ghost into his body, perhaps being contaminated with the phantom exhalations and odors of a running man. The mechanical hound is now landing by helicopter at the site of the burning. And there on the small screen was the burnt house, and the crowd, and something with a sheet over it, and out of the sky, fluttering, came the helicopter like a grotesque flower. So they must have their game out, thought Montag. The circus must go on, even with war beginning within the hour. He watched the scene, fascinated, not wanting to move. It seemed so remote, and no part of him. It was a play apart and separate, wondrous to watch, not without its strange pleasure. That's all for me, you thought. That's all just taking place for me. That's all taking place just for me, by God. If he wished, he could linger here in comfort, and follow the entire hunt on through its swift phases, down alleys, across streets, over empty running avenues, crossing lots and playgrounds, with pauses here or there for the necessary commercials, up other alleys to the burning house of Mr. and Mrs. Black, and so on, finally to this house with Faber and himself seated, drinking, while the electric hound snuffed down the last trail, silent as a drift of death itself, skidded to a halt outside that window there. Then, if he wished, Montag might rise, walk to the window, keep one eye on the TV screen, open the window, lean out, look back, and see himself dramatized, described, made over, standing there, lined, I think. I'm not sure what that word is. Limned? I don't know if that's a typo because of this version of the audiobook, or if that's actually a word. Limned. Feel free to look it up. Lined, I guess we'll call it lined for now. And the bright small television screen from outside, a drama to be watched objectively, knowing that in other parlors he was large as life, in full color, dimensionally perfect. And if he kept his eye peeled quickly, he would see himself, an instant before oblivion, being punctured for the benefit of how many civilian parlor sitters who had been wakened from sleep a few minutes ago by the frantic sirening of their living room walls to come watch the big game, the hunt, the one-man carnival. Would he have time for a speech? As the hound seized him in view of 10 or 20 or 30 million people, mightn't he sum up his entire life in the last week in one single phrase or word that would stay with them long after the hound had turned, clenching him in its metal plier jaws, and trotted off in darkness, while the camera remained stationary, watching the creature dwindle in the distance, a splendid fade-out. What could he say in a single word, a few words, that would sear all their faces and wake them up? There, whispered Faber. Out of a helicopter glided in something that was not machine, not animal, not dead, not alive, glowing with pale green luminosity. It stood near the smoking ruins of Montag's house, and the men brought his discarded flamethrower to it and put it down under the muzzle of the hound. There was a whirring, clicking, humming. Montag shook his head and got up and drank the rest of his drink. It's time. I'm sorry about this. I think I'll stop there for now, and I'll continue from page 86 out of 106.